manufacturing index is nothing to do with, basically it's not one survey. I don't even know if many people realize it's a survey, but anyway, it's not one question that then results in this number. This is actually a composite of all the questions put together. So let's actually go and have a look at this. So I'm going to explain it to you now. Like I said, it isn't. I've not been able to find a copy of the survey anywhere. So you're going to have to rely on me a little bit. But I am going to show you on the website where it is. So as in kind of a hint towards what the questions are. So if you go to this, click on latest release. You can also obviously Google ISM report. They actually do 3 reports, okay? Manufacturing, services and hospital. So they also do for the hospital or the health industry a survey. Obviously that's not followed at all by traders, don't really care too much about that, so you can ignore it, but just wanted to make you aware. So now we're on the website, we can have a look at this. You know, how is it calculated? So I've explained to you in great detail what it is. It's a survey sent to 400 purchasing managers, literally a physical survey sent out to them. These are members of the ISM and they send the survey back. Okay, now it's probably, in fact, I'm going to come back to it. I mentioned about the market survey and I said, you know, the traders don't really look at that much, or the market doesn't look at it. No pun intended, but market survey is not looked at as much as the ISM survey. There's a reason for that. And again, I'll come back to that in a second. But you can see here, ISM report on business is what it's called. There are 3 of them. Okay, the hospital is sent to purchasing managers at hospitals. You can ignore that. Like I said, it's specific to the health industry. Obviously very useful for people, agencies, who need data about the health agencies. For our purposes, we're interested in manufacturing and services. Obviously huge part of an economy, right? Manufacturing and services. We saw that with goods, people buying physical goods and services. We saw that in the GDP report, right? And we saw services makes up obviously a large part of that. So what you can do, you click on, go to this manufacturing PMI, view report. Okay, click on agree. So yeah, you can see here the release, manufacturing PMI at 58.7. Obviously that's what it says for me, 58.7. Now when you come to look at this, you know, whether you go through here or whether you go through Google, you get to the same page. You want to go to the Institute for Supply Management page. And I'm thinking if you don't go direct, sorry, I'm just checking how you can get to it. So I think it's here, there, supply management. If you go directly to the main page, it's here, supply management news and reports, ISM report on business. Okay, so same page. Click on view report. So we're doing both of them together because you're going to see they're so similar. There's no point me doing another section and boring you senseless. So we'll look at manufacturing and we'll then go and look at services, but just focus on manufacturing for a moment. Can you see it says 58.7%, right? You see that matches this, 58.7. Obviously this is for me. You might be looking at a different month. Yours might be 60, 40, 50, I don't know, okay? But essentially what is that, right? How is it calculated? What exactly is it? So basically what it is, right, can you see it says what respondents are saying? So obviously they've had some commentary back from some respondents. Look, business continues to be good with strong incoming orders from customers, continue to battle labor, material and transportation pressures. And do you see these are purchasing managers making a note? Probably they asked them for a comment at the bottom. Obviously they can't do anything with that comment and put it into a number. You remember I was saying it's a very qualitative survey. However, what they do on this survey is, do you remember I said to you this number, this 58.7, right, which you see here, okay, this 58.7, and I said to you that is not actually responsible. It's not, basically a lot of people think you know, it's just one number, that gets produced. It isn't. My point is that this 58.7, right, it's actually not part of the survey. This is the survey here, okay? And then these are put together and weighted, and then, you know, it's a composite of basically, so it's a weighted average of these put together comes to 58.7. So it's kind of telling us overall how the survey was in one number across all of these. So it might be easier for you to understand if I just explain to you, you know, how the survey works. So basically, all you need to know, right, and amazing how few people know this, but very, very important to understand this. So when the survey is sent out to them, right, like I said, I haven't been able to get a copy of this survey, can't find it anywhere, but when this survey is sent out to them, the questions that are asked are in these categories, okay? So it's these: new orders, production, employment, supplier deliveries, inventories, customers' inventories, prices, backlog of orders, new export imports, and then imports. What I'm going to do, because I want to cover manufacturing and services at the same time, it's going to be a lot easier. It saves double work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the services. So if you go to the services PMI, we can come back to that in a second. Okay, so don't worry about, because I think they show both side by side. Yes, they do. Can you see they've got services here and they've got manufacturing PMI? So a lot of the questions are similar. Obviously, some are sent to people in the services industry, some are sent to people in the manufacturing industry. That's why you have an ISM manufacturing release and a services release later. You know, rather than me coming here on the service saying, hey, employment, and you can see they ask the same questions essentially to both. I mean, obviously, they're both purchasing managers, right? It's going to be a purchasing manager in a manufacturing company, or it's going to be in a services company. So remember I said you've got these purchasing managers, these executives responsible for the supply chain, very senior, terrible drawing. But essentially, these purchasing managers, right, they're sent this survey, okay? Now, they're in these categories. So that's why I've come here to show you that the categories are the same. Obviously, they would be across services or the manufacturing, across services or the manufacturing industries. Now, in terms of new orders, so let's just go through these one by one. This will essentially ask the purchasing manager, let's say you're a purchasing manager, it will basically ask them, you know, I don't know the exact wording, but it will say, you know, how are the level of new orders from customers. Okay, you know, and then there'll be, I think it's has activity increased, has activity stayed the same, or you know, not changed basically. And then finally, sorry, I should say finally, sorry, you may not be able to read my handwriting, it's so bad, isn't it? Activity, sorry, has activity decreased? Okay, so, you know, better. It's terrible handwriting, isn't it? So essentially for each one of these, right, they'll be asked, I believe they're given 3 options, right? So activity, sorry about this, increased, You'd have thought after doing the Prime Foundation my handwriting would be better, but it isn't. Okay, so that's better. Has activity increased? So they'll be asking these purchasing managers throughout the month. Obviously, they'll be sent the survey. Has activity increased? Or has it decreased, or is it unchanged? So each of these, so for example, here you've got new orders. So new orders from customers, right? So you can see how important this is. Basically, I would say this is one of the most important responses, because this is literally, it's almost a gauge of consumer spending, right? Think about it. You're asking these purchasing managers orders from your customers. How's demand? It's essentially asking them, how's consumer spending, basically. So this one I know is followed quite, obviously you can imagine as institutional traders, it can be quite difficult to keep an eye on all of these. You've got 1,000,001 things going on, the market's moving all over the place. Obviously you'll look at the headline, but a lot of people will check this new orders because obviously, like I said, it's very, very close to consumer spending. I know a lot of investment banks also like to look at this as kind of a forewarning as to how economic growth may be shifting. If there's a shift, often it shows up in new orders first, because obviously these purchasing managers, if we're getting into a recession or the opposite, if things are starting to boom, they're going to see customers are obviously buying loads of things. Like I said, it's qualitative. Put yourself in his position. You're a purchasing manager. Your customers are buying loads of things. You can see that, right? And the survey comes through and it says, hey, has activity of new orders from your customers increased? You're going to be thinking, yeah, it has. So you're going to tick the box and say, yep, activity increased. Okay, so you can see how important that is, and trying to get ahead of the curve rather than waiting for GDP or other output data to tell you, hey, the economy is turning or doing really well or changing. This is going to give you a great insight into that. You can see why it's so important for traders, because they're going to be looking at it. I've also noticed a lot of people like to look at this as a sort of gauge for earnings. So, obviously if you follow the S&P earnings, think about it. How do companies make profits? Right? People buy stuff from them. Right? The more people that buy stuff, the more money they make. Simple as that. Okay, so have orders from your customers, new orders, gone up? Yeah, means I'm making more money. Do you see? Very, very highly correlated this with earnings, company earnings. I've been noticing this over the years, that a lot of analysts and so on will follow that, and institutional traders will obviously, just going into earnings season, like to keep an eye on that. So I think that is one of the main ones. Recently, the inventories has also been quite important, obviously with the COVID situation, but obviously by the time you come to watch this, it may not be. So, different things depending on the environment you're in will be more important than others. New orders will always be important. But I know I spent a lot of time on that first one, but ultimately it's very, very important. So you can see, my point is, for many of you, this is the first time you'll be thinking, oh my God, I didn't realize the PMI, as in the manufacturing 58.7, is made up of all these different components. I didn't even know. I thought it was just one number. It isn't, okay? That 58.7, my point is, it's not the number, okay? It's not the result of the questions. It's more a combination of putting everything together, okay? There's underlying questions to that, essentially. So we talked about new orders with employment, obviously in terms of hiring activity, level of hiring activity at your firm. Is it going up? Is it going down? Very, very important. You can see that will be not as closely followed as new orders, but obviously will be followed to see if there's any dramatic shifts in that. Supplier deliveries, are you like I said, right now these type of things are more in the fore. In terms of COVID, we know there's supply bottlenecks. So it's basically your suppliers, people who are supplying you as a business. Is the activity going up? Is it stronger? Is it weaker? Are suppliers delivering to you in terms of their activity on time? Essentially, are they is supply delivery activity up? Essentially, are you getting your goods from your suppliers? This is rather than you supplying to others, are they supplying to you in good time, and so on and so forth. So again, quite important depending on where you are in the economic cycle, and obviously worth spotting little shifts in that. The thing is, I don't necessarily, we'll talk about this when we do the analysis section, I don't necessarily look at these individually when they're released, but obviously when I'm doing research and I'm reading, I'll keep an eye on these things. If analysts are mentioning these things, and I'll go and double check. And the point is, do you see, at least I know what it is. When someone says it, I know straight away what it is, because I've spent time understanding this report. And I said this to you, this is one of the most important things, is that you actually understand the report, so that when you go and read research, you don't have to take people's word for it. You can just make your own opinion. Okay. Inventories is to do with stock levels, obviously, how the stock levels increase in levels, basically, stock levels or not. Prices is, again, another very important component. What are you paying for prices? As in, it's almost like PPI, where it's on the kind of production side, right? Input, rather than what are consumers paying. What are you as a business paying for your supplies? What are your prices, right? So we can see here, obviously we're in an inflationary environment. The time I'm doing this in 2021, inflation is crazy, and you can see that. Can you see that reflected there? 82, very, very high from the services side, and even from the manufacturing side in December. Come off November, but so there are some deflationary pressures there. So this is kind of being watched. Normally it isn't, but because, see, I said it depends what environment you're in. Right now you're in an inflationary environment, so obviously this is being watched, but generally it won't be being watched because it won't fluctuate that much, but right now it is. So again, just to remind you, purchasing manager on this survey, okay, he'll be asked, are you seeing your prices increase, decrease, or stay the same? Okay, 3 options. Okay, very important you understand that there's 3 options. It's almost like a multiple choice, increase, decrease, or the same. Okay, they can't give some essay they can give some responses, and you've seen them up here, but these responses don't go into these numbers. Okay, these numbers are purely based on, I'm going to show you how they come up with this number. Okay, how this 82.5 is reflective of basically lots of these guys saying they're increasing, prices are increasing, so it's 82.5. Backlog of orders, as it says on the tin, backlog of orders from customers. Are you able to meet demand? Are you able to meet that? Again, new export orders. So this is demand from, so this is new orders domestically, this is from abroad. Imports, so that is basically the import of materials, essentially, or goods coming into the firm, because obviously they'll need imports of materials, right, to produce things. So imports, and then sentiment on inventories, and that's it, and then customers' inventory. So you can see these 2 are the only 2 in the services. For some reason they ask that question, and then in the manufacturing they ask that question. Okay, but really not that important. These are the main ones. Okay, sorry, excluding the sentiment. Okay, so these are the main ones. Okay. Okay, can you see the same questions are asked in services and manufacturing? So, you know, pause it, maybe go back and watch again, just in terms of what these things are in the questionnaire. Okay. Okay. You can see what I said at the start of this section, and I hope you find it very valuable. You know, some people might think, oh my god, this is taking ages, but in fact, I hope you see it as a bonus. You know, at the end of the day, you've paid me. You know how I am. I want to make sure you're getting 10 times more and stuff that is not out there. This stuff that I've just explained to you, I realized when I was building this section, initially I was going to say, hey, just go and check the website. Can you see? No offense, 99% of you will be lost. You won't have a clue. What is this? Right? You won't have a clue what is going on. That's why I'm taking my time to explain it to you. So hopefully you see it as a positive and you know, see it as a almost real. How do I say it? Benefit of having. You know, I appreciate people have obviously bought the course, and you know it's not an easy expense to make, and I want to make sure that basically you are being given 10 times what you have spent on the course. And that's why I'm doing this, because I know it'll be so easy for me to say, hey, just go and check the website, and it's taking the mickey. Really, you know, I want to make sure that you come away from this understanding this ISM number, because it's one of the most important numbers. I want you to understand it better than anyone. Okay, and you will. Now you can see that. You know, I wasn't just saying that. You can see that. You're going to understand this. You know, ask yourself, how many people do you think understand this number the way I've just explained it to you? And it's actually going to make even, I just realized what I need to do to make that really come to life is explain to you how these numbers are actually put together. Okay, so I'm just going to explain for a couple of them. Okay, so new orders from customers and prices, right? So this is how it works, right? So let's say all of these purchasing managers, okay, they sent this survey, right? And let's say it's January, okay? And like in fact, this was released on January the 4th, right? So it's for December. Let's assume it's December right now, okay? So we can bring it really to life. And I'll show you how this 58.7 gets calculated. So basically, you've got these purchasing managers, right? They sent this survey, ISM questionnaire, right? And literally it will say to them every single thing, you know, what's the activity of new orders from your customers, right? Increase, same, or decrease, right? Or unchanged, you could say, right? So I think how they label it is better, same, or worse. Okay, those are the only three options. Okay, so for each of these categories, you know, how's the new orders, how's hiring at your firm, are you increasing, you know, hiring activity at your firm? And yes, it's better, no, it's the same, actually it's worse. You know, obviously employment activity at our firm is worse. You know, how are inventories? Worse. You know, we're struggling, we have running out of stock. Okay, it's worse. Do you see what I mean? Every one of these on the questionnaire, so it'd be question 1, question, I should have put there question 1, but yeah, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And they'll ask them those, and you can see the only responses they're allowed to give is better, same, and you can for all of these give those responses, right? You know, prices that you're paying for your products or services or whatever, have they gone up? Like I said, on the input side, are they increasing, decreasing, you know, better, same, worse? And do you see for all of these? So The two we're going to focus on just very briefly is prices and new orders. Okay, so and believe it or not, I've never done this. I haven't prepared this calculation, so hopefully, like I said, I don't like any of this stuff being necessarily scripted. So let me just think right now out loud the best way to explain this to you. Okay, so let's say it's 400 purchasing managers. Okay, 400 big firms in the US, and they sent out this survey. Just make sure we're being recorded. Do not want to record this again. I would literally, just give me 1 second. I get paranoid. Yeah, because it's such a big section. I do not want to have to record it again. I think I mentioned you had a couple of disasters earlier in the course, so I get very paranoid. But okay, so let's say 400 purchasing managers are sent the survey. Okay, some of them are going to say orders from customers, like I said, very, very important, reflective of consumer spending, profits, and for the reasons I mentioned before. A lot of them will say, yeah, orders have gone up, right? They're better. Some will say the same. Some will say they're worse. How on earth do we get this in a number? Do you remember the government gave them a task of saying, right, we need a sort of clue as to how output might be. How do we get this into a number, basically? You know, imagine the ISM turning up at the government's doorstep and saying, well, here you go, here's 400 responses, or giving this to traders, you know, on the data calendar, here's 400 responses. No one's going to pay any attention to it, right? It's like, what is this? I haven't got time to go through 400 responses. So what they do is they put it into something called a diffusion index, and that's what this is. Okay, it's a diffusion index. Okay, you'll read all sorts of complicated stuff on this. It isn't. It's really straightforward. It's a way of It's basically a way of encompassing all of these responses, right, in one number that's reflective of how well spread out or diffused basically these responses are amongst kind of the sample population. Now, just thinking that sounds very complicated. It isn't. The best way to think of it is through an example. It's really, really straightforward. Basically, a diffusion index helps us to kind of see the degree to which responses were either better or worse. Okay, so basically I'm going to show you, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you, and I need a calculator for this, or maybe get your calculator out. It's basically 50%, okay, times the number of responses that are the same number, okay, plus 100% times the number of responses of better. Okay, and what that does is, by doing it at 50%, it makes, and I'll show you this, right? Do you remember here, it says above 50 indicates expansion, below 50. Do you remember we even did it on the, don't worry, right now it's not making any sense. It's going to make a lot of sense in a second. Do you remember we done that 50, the cutoff, 50? Above 50 is good, below 50 is bad. Again, it's just, I'm sorry to say this, but it's just embarrassing how few people actually understand what on earth they're looking at, right? I'm trying to make head nor tail, they don't understand this. That what is that 50? Okay, so what it is, where do we have it? Was it here? Yeah, it was here, wasn't it? Just like to have that there. God, I've lost the number now. Let's just put it there anyway. The 50, okay, it's 50% of responses. Okay, so can you see here the actual number? If you see at the top, 62%, okay, or with the manufacturing, 58.7%. It's to do with responses. Okay, so when it's 50, Okay, what that means is it's to do with percentage, basically. It's to do with percentage of responses. Now 50, what they've done, the reason they've pegged it at 50, right, is 50 equals no change, or the same. Can you see it here? The same. Okay, so if it's 50, okay, what that means is that basically all the responses have come back as no change. Okay, so can you see why it's always 50 is the base? Because think about it, right? We'll do the calculation together. All right, let's say 400 people are asked, have prices gone up for the stuff that you're bringing into your firm? Or let's go here, new orders. Are you seeing more increased activity of orders from your customers? And some of them say, nah, we're seeing, as in none of them say, they got three options, right? Either they can say we're seeing more, which is this. They can say we're seeing less. We're saying actually we're seeing no change. Unchanged, right? I should have put unchanged here. Okay. So they're seeing the same, basically. Now let's say all 400 say, yeah, unchanged, right? So remember what I said the formula is. 50% times the number of the same, essentially. And in fact, let me just put this down properly. Sorry, I just like to do these things properly. Because it is actually the percentage, okay? So don't worry, it makes sense in a second. So it's 50% times the percentage of purchasing managers that responded unchanged or same, okay, plus 100% times percentage of purchasing managers that responded better or increased, right? Better or increased. Okay, we're going to do the calculation together. It's going to make a lot of sense. Don't worry if you're getting a little bit lost. Don't worry about it. Okay, so again, let's say these 400 guys were asked, new orders. Are you seeing an increase in orders from your customers? And most of them say, nah, it's all the same. All of them say it's the same, right? We're not seeing an increase in orders. We're not seeing a decrease, as in it's not great time for celebration and it's not time to get depressed because they've gone down. It's just the same, basically. No change, right? So would you agree? How many percent of their 400 have come up with unchanged? 100%, yeah? All of them have responded and said, it's the same, no change. What's 50? So remember what I said, the diffusion index. It does 50% times the percentage that have said unchanged plus 100% of those that have said increase. So it's 50% times 100% equals 50 plus 100% times how many people said it was better? None. Okay, so can you see it equals 50? So can you see why the benchmark is 50? When it's 50, right, if this new orders was 50, that means it's unchanged. Everyone came back and said there's no change. So can you see why now this says above 50 indicates expansion, below indicates contraction, 50 indicates no change, okay? Now, I'm going to do this one more time because I just want to make sure that no one got lost with that. And this time what I'm going to do, it'll be easier if you think of it as this, okay? It's going to be a lot easier if you're still struggling to get your head around this, and you shouldn't, but if you are, don't worry about it. Imagine this only goes out to 100 purchasing managers, because it saves us having to convert the 400 into percentage, okay? Imagine there's only survey goes out to 100 purchasing managers, okay? And it's the diffusion index Okay, so bring all the responses of increase, unchanged, decreased. Okay, maybe get a pen and paper and write this stuff down because it'll be a lot easier for you. Increase, better. These are the survey responses. Same, decrease, worse. Okay, diffusion index, as in this is a diffusion index, this number. Diffusion index equals 50% times the number of responses that were the same. Okay, plus 100% times the better number of responses that came in better. Okay, and a couple of things. Okay, by doing it this way, you might be wondering, you know, what about worse? It automatically takes into account the proportion of the ratio between better and worse. Don't worry, you'll see that in a second. Also, you have to do 50% here because that sets the benchmark. Think about it, you can't do 100% because if everyone said there's no change and then you did 100% times that, the diffusion benchmark will be 100. You want it to be 50. So then you can see, like I said, a diffusion, how much is it spread out? So versus what? 50. We need that benchmark, right? Above 50 is good, below 50 gives us that kind of barometer of good versus bad, of and to what extent, right? Because you can't just say it's good, because then you just have a fixed number. Above 50 you just say 60, but how good? 65. Oh, that's better than 60. Do you see? Or 55. Okay, fairly good. 60. Oh, really good. 65. Oh, that's brilliant. 70. Wow, we're off the charts now. Do you see what I mean? So, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, so let's say all 100 purchasing managers came back and said, nah, you know what? No change, mate. Nah, no, nothing. New orders. What's 50% of the 100? 50. Can you see that? That's why. That's the benchmark. Okay. Now, I want you, as an exercise in this, to play around with this. Prove it to yourself that any time this number is over 50, it means there were more increased or better responses than worse. Okay, we'll do a couple together. Okay, so let's say out of these 100 purchasing managers, right, you can use 400, but then you need to obviously convert that into a percentage, right? But it's just easier if you do it as 100, not to get confused, but 100 purchasing managers, I don't know, let's play around with it a bit, right? Let's say 70. Obviously not all 100 of them are gonna say, right? Everything's the same, right? Statistically, that's highly unlikely, right? Some are gonna say things were better, things were worse in terms of orders from customers. Let's say 70 came back out of the 100 and said unchanged, right? So what is it? 50% times unchanged. So 70 times 50% equals what? 35. Okay. Now, let's say that's 30 remaining, right? Let's say 15 said, oh, things are better, and 15 said things are worse, right? So what's the formula? 50 times 70 plus 100 times 15. What's 100% times 15 times 100% is 15. What's 35 plus 15? 50. Does it make sense that it will be 50? Yes, it does. Because we had the equal amount of betters and worse. Right? So we had 15 purchasing managers said, hey, new orders were better. We had 15 purchasing managers say they were worse, and 70 say they were unchanged. Do you see? The economic implication of that is what? Unchanged. 50. So can you see on our dashboard, if we had a reading of 50, be there. Do you see? Nothing to get excited about, nothing to get worried about. Right? What does the calendar say? Above 50, below 50. If it's at 50, nah, nothing to get excited about, nothing to get worried about. Now you ask yourself, if the same number of purchasing managers said things are better, and the same number of purchasing managers said things are worse, offsets. So no surprise to see 50. Okay, so play around with this, right? So you can see, for example, you know, let's say that, and no matter where you do, play around with all the numbers, no matter which way you do it, above 50 will always indicate that more managers ticked the increase box or better than decreased, right? We can do a couple of examples, like I said, and then we're going to end this because I realize it's been going on for ages, but it's good. I'm happy it's been explained properly and there's no stone left unturned, because I want to make sure everyone comes away and really understands what this number is every time it's released. So let's say, right, you've got 100 purchasing managers, they send this questionnaire, right, and this time, rather than 70 saying it's unchanged, what if only, I don't know, 60 came back as unchanged? So we know it's 100% times 60. Sorry, it's 50%, sorry. 50% times 60, right? 50% times the number of people that came back and said that it's unchanged. 60 times 50% equals 30, right? Plus 100% of those that said it's better. We can play around with this, right? So how many are left? If 60 said unchanged, that's 40 left, right? Let's say 30 came back and said things are better. Do you see equals 30? What's 30 plus 30? 60. Okay, very close to what we're seeing here, 61.5. Can you see that makes sense that would be a good thing? Why? Because how many are left? 60, 30, 10. Right, so 30 must have said better, only 10. Can you see, right, why 60, a number above 50, is positive? Because 30 guys came back and said, hey, I'm seeing more orders from my customers, right? Only 10 came back and said, I'm seeing worse. So if 30 are saying better and only 10, can you see it's a good thing? The majority of those that responded were either in the unchanged or better camp. Okay, and that's why it came back at 60. And that's probably what happened. Roughly around this proportion came back and said, hey, new orders from my customers are good. Right, can you see? Obviously a lot of guys must have said unchanged, but then you know, maybe 30% came back and said it's better, 10% might have said worse. Result was 60, right? We can flip it, prove it to yourself. Like I said, as an exercise, I want you to do loads of these, and you will not be able to find a proportion of better and worse. If there's more better responses than worse responses, it's always going to be above 50. If there's less, it's always going to be below 50. Okay, simple as that. All right, let's try the other way around, right? So there's 40, this time 30 said worse, right? And you see it's not part of the formula. I'm going to show you that it's reflected in the formula, because now only 10 said it's better. 10 times 100 is what? It's no longer 30, it's 10. What's 30 plus 10? 40. Do you see? It's below 50 now. It's a disaster. It's absolutely disastrous. Can you see? Where would you be on this chart? If you hit 40 down here, off the chart. When did we see that? During COVID. Can you see? What happened is this survey got sent out. You can see a big chunk of them came back and said, nah, you know what? I'm seeing worse. I'm seeing declining orders. And that's why it came back as around 40. Do you see that? So maybe up to 30, 40, I don't know the percentage obviously, more would have said it was a decline. Okay, so hopefully that was really useful for you, and that, you know, no one, again, I wish this was explained to me. It wasn't. I had to just kind of figure this out. Actually, can you see, and it's nowhere on the website, it's unexplained, it's completely crazy. That's why I wanted to really give you great value, really take the time out to explain to you how this index is, diffusion index is put together. It's really fascinating. I highly encourage you to do that exercise and prove it to yourself. That below 50 is always more negative responses than positive. Okay, so here you can see in terms of inventories, increase or decrease in inventory levels. You can see a lot of them are saying, hey, decreasing. Can you see direction? Contracting. So more purchasing managers responded with the third option, decreasing, then increasing. Okay. Now, what happens is all of these are put together, and a composite of all of these gives 62. Okay, when you put all of these together, that's what the ISM will do, is they'll put them all together into 5 categories, and they're all weighted at 20% each. Those 5 categories equals 62. Okay, so kind of makes sense because it's reflective of, some are going to be, obviously here you see inventories is below 50, but obviously, you put a number out below 50, everyone's going to be panicking, but that's not a reflection of everything, is it? Because can you see a lot of the responses in the survey, in the questionnaire, were very positive. Here you see about production, new orders, employment, all of these are positive. Just because one is negative, no. You want to give a kind of reflection of all of them together in one number. Okay, so can you see why it's very, very useful as a number, why so many institutional traders look at it? Because when that number is released, it gives them a broad perspective across all of these categories. And then if they want, the market will dig into these. Like I said, they'll look at the new orders number very quickly. Oh, is that okay? Because you can actually think about it, have a positive services or manufacturing PMI number, have an abysmal or a poor new orders number. You see, sometimes the market might, we're getting into more of the analysis type of things. You can see there's a lot of discretion here. I'm teaching you this because you can see sometimes if you get a negative reaction to the PMI, it could be because sentiment is negative anyway. And just because the PMI came out positive, the market is reacting to other things, like maybe yields, bond yields, or commodity prices, and the market's focusing on other things. But if it's actually focusing on the PMI, you see a positive number, but it reacts negatively, check out. It could be the new orders, it could be something within it that the market didn't like. Bottom line is, this number is more a reflection of all of these put together. You now know how all of these are calculated in detail. You can see they've got amazing, all of these little pieces of information about different components of the business and the economy, and this is very, very useful. You can see for all organizations, FOMC, governments, people to see very early on where GDP may end up, where some production data may end up later in the month, later in the quarter, and it's released on the first business day. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why it's just one of the most widely followed pieces of information, because it's released so early. So we'll kind of wrap it up there. I will just mention this market survey because I promised you at the start I'll just mention it briefly. So there is another company that does the same survey. It's called Market Final Manufacturing PMI. Can you see it's the same thing? It's a diffusion index and so on and so forth. For some reason, in fact there is a reason, in my opinion, it's not widely followed. Can you see? It actually has more respondents. Okay, so this ISM manufacturing is around 300 to 400 respondents. That market has 800, and it's also, I believe, very difficult to find this information, but I must have read it somewhere. I think the market survey does specify to purchasing managers to focus just on the US. I think the ISM is a little bit more international, looking at obviously international trade as well. So to an extent, this is actually more accurate because it has more respondents and obviously focused mainly on USA, and I think there's some other factors behind it, albeit, obviously the ISM is a great survey as well. I do not look at this market. I want to look at what other institutional traders are looking at. Okay, and I believe the reason I couldn't find anything on this, why the ISM is followed more, because it's not stated anywhere. But you can see it is, because it's a high impact ISM, and I know it is because during my time in investment banking and so on and so forth, everyone focused on this one, ISM. I believe the reason is something to do with the history I was talking to you about. 1915, they were approached by obviously president at the time, I think Hoover, in 1930s Great Depression, huge organization, 50,000 members, long history. It's one of those things, right? You know, sometimes with products that are kind of the bellwethers because they were the first to market, these guys have been around a long time doing this. It's highly respected organization. They've been around a long time. They were tasked by the government to do this. It's kind of like, you could say, habit or whatever it is. So it's basically the one that everyone focuses on. The only reason I mentioned the market one is because you may sometimes, I don't look at it, but the other survey, they tend to be very highly correlated. Obviously they are pretty much the purchasing manager community, but sometimes there may be some divergences between them. Once every few years you might have a big divergence. I just want to point that out, because you might be watching this course in 5 years and you may be reading a news article and it may mention that people were thrown off by this divergence. And I don't want you to think, hey, Envy told us about this ISM, but I just wanted to mention the market, that 99% of the time, you don't even need to take my word for it, you can see red. Okay, there's a reason for that. 99% of the time, and 99% of traders will be looking at that number. Just be aware of the other one, okay, so that if there is a news article or something you read and it mentions it, I don't want you to be lost thinking, what on earth is this? If they do mention it, just wanting you to know there is another one. Okay, this one, market survey. But honestly, I don't look at it. Okay, if you want to ask me why I do, I don't look at it. If I read a news article, and I think the last time it was mentioned was, I think a few years back, there was a little bit of a divergence and I read something about it and people were asking questions, okay, and that's about the extent of it. So I thought I'd mention it to you, but for all our intents and purposes, this is the one. So hopefully that was useful for you. You can see, next time you see 58.7, you're going to be like, yeah, that is, the majority of responses were positive in the overall survey. When composed all together, it gave a index number of 58.7. So overall, the responses were positive. If I want, let me just go and have a quick look here at the detail. Excuse me. So you can go. Excuse me. So you can go into the website, have a look. Let me just scroll down. Oh, there's the breakdown. Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah, very strong new orders from customers. You know, hiring. Yep, it's okay. All right, looks pretty good actually across the board. Main thing is, you know, when I do my institutional Sundays or when I do my research at the weekend, that's the best time to have a look at it. Just keep an eye if there were any kind of drastic discrepancies or changes in any of the breakdowns. All right, maybe when you're trading, you don't need to worry so much in the moment. But when you're doing some research or you're just going over the data at the end of the week, or you read something and someone says, you know, new orders was this, now you know what they're talking about, right? It's that section of it. And when all of these are put together, it comes up with that. You can see very, very useful for the FOMC will be looking at this to kind of get a lead on where output might be coming out. Obviously in a few weeks time, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we do the analysis section. That's the understanding section. Incredibly comprehensive. Hopefully you found that useful. Can't wait till the next section. In fact, I can, because it's about 2 in the morning actually. I'm absolutely shattered, but yeah, it came out perfect. I was a bit really nervous about doing this, you know, even someone like me, because I have very high standards. I was nervous of that, but I'll be able to get this across. Very, very happy with how that's come out. The next one is, so we've covered both of them, right? Manufacturing and services in one go. Not sure 100% which one we'll do next. Probably just have a quick look at payrolls. and then obviously CPI, and then take it from there. Take care.